We're going to talk about this iconic, beautiful work, Gustav Klimt's The Kiss. Klimt painted this piece at the dawn of the 20th century in the artistic hotbed that was Vienna, his hometown. At the time, there was a lot of money in the aristocracy and the bourgeoisie, and that they were frequenting the theatres and the music halls and spending a lot of money on the arts. And Klimt was known as the forefront of this. Klimt was known as a bit of a renegade and a bit of an enfant terrible, but this piece actually really put him on the map of art history, and it put Vienna on the map of art history, being the most expensive painting ever sold in Austria until that point. It's quite typical of Klimt's style of work, a lot of pattern work, a lot of gold, these beautiful colours. And in Klimt's lifetime, he really produced two types of artwork. He produced commissions, which were generally portraits of the leading aristocratic women, leading bourgeois women of the time in Vienna. They wanted to be painted in all their finery with their jewels and their beautiful dresses, and we see those today. And the other side of Klimt's artwork are these more dreamlike, sensual pieces of mainly depicting women. And this piece here sits in between these two types of artwork. Interestingly and unusually for Klimt, he's actually portraying a man, and Klimt really never used to paint men. We're going to look more at the subject matter of this piece. We're going to look at the subject matter. We might say, well, the clue's in the name. It's called The Kiss. Pretty self-explanatory. Of course, there's a man and a woman here and they're in an embrace. But art historians throughout time have done some research into this piece, of course, and have uncovered some other kind of potential double or deeper meanings to this piece. We've looked at drawings and we've realised that Klimt used himself in drawing sketches as prep for this. He and his friend Emily, they both posed for this piece. What's interesting about these drawings is that Klimt never really drew in his face or Emily's face into these preparatory sketches. You know, the fact that he's used his body and his friend's body as a vessel to portray this artwork suggests, is there a double meaning to this piece? Interestingly, in Klimt's life, he said he's never produced a portrait of himself, so that gives us a clue to say that this is definitely not him. Other art historians have suggested that this is an allegory of that famous story of Orpheus in Eurydice, and especially a particular moment in the story where Orpheus has to sadly say goodbye forever to his love Eurydice. And here we can see that Orpheus has got Eurydice in this grasp, if this is exactly who they are, almost like he doesn't want to let her go and fall down into the inevitable abyss, which it looks like is being depicted in this painting. Also, Eurydice's skin tone is extremely pale, translucent, death-like, and we can see lots of blue in the skin tones, representing the fact that potentially her circulation is waning. It's quite a usual colour combination for Klimt. He liked to play with colours, this blue and this gold, but it is interesting to see that this plays a part in potentially telling a story here. We're going to look in the next video at the artistic movements that this piece represents. We're going to look at the artistic movements that influenced Klimt. Really, there are two artistic eras that influenced him. Klimt looked back to the past, the ancient civilizations and historic civilizations, but he was also influenced by what was happening in Europe at the time he was producing this. Vienna had its own artistic movement at the time called the Viennese Secession, which Klimt was at the forefront of, and he's known for essentially being the poster boy. But across Europe, Western Europe, another movement was sweeping the place called Art Nouveau, or Jugendstil in Germany, and a bunch of other names in other cities. But really, Paris was the centre. And Art Nouveau was all about sweeping lines, organic forms, organic lines, pattern-like, lots of references to nature, animals, leaves, flowers, very much an aesthetic. And this is also seen in the British Isles at the time, where the arts and crafts movement really took sway and even made its way into manufacturing, where it was seen in a lot of mass-produced crockery, etc., and homeware from the artistic movement. And we can see the references to that here, or the influence to that here. There's a lot of organic shapes, a lot of references to nature with floral shapes. There's no real linear depictions here, except perhaps in the cape, which we'll look at in the next video, the cape of the man. So we can see lots of references here. In the next video, we're going to look at the other artistic references that Klimt looked at in the past. We're looking at the art historical movements that really influenced Klimt here. We know that in 1903 he went to Ravenna in Italy and he just studied the Byzantine art there. And we know that Byzantine art and architecture, it was replete with gold. It was very, very sumptuous, a very beautiful, decadent affair. This we can see very well influenced here. Throughout a lot of Klimt's artwork, he used a lot of gold in his pieces. Klimt also looked back to more ancient civilizations, such as the ancient Egyptians, and we see a lot of motifs and icons in his work, references to that. In the man's cape, we can see, or the man's cloak, we can see these sort of vertical block lines of shapes which almost are reminiscent of the way that hieroglyphs were written, those clean lines, those forms of vertical writing that we saw from the ancient Egyptian aesthetic. And in the women's cape, we also see these beautiful scroll motifs, and this is representative of the Mycenaean era, which Klimt was also taken by. And we see this pattern work replicated in other works that he produced. And interestingly, these two styles of pattern really represent the idea of man, a blocky, more masculine type of pattern, and this more scrolling, delicate, round effect of the more feminine styling in the woman's cape. We're going to look in the next video at actually what the public and the critics thought at the time when Klimt unveiled this work. We're looking at what the feedback was for Klimt at the time when he unveiled this. In fact, it was fantastic. It was already purchased before he'd completed it, before he'd exhibited it, which is a great sign for an artist. The 7 previous years, Klimt had been commissioned to work on a big commission for the university. These canvases were to cover the ceiling of this public building, and he worked obviously extremely hard on this big commission. And unfortunately, it was met with extreme disregard, and it was criticised, and actually it was never exhibited or never put in place. It was sold onto private buyers, and actually a portion of it ended up in the hands of the SS and went to a castle in Germany, which was bombed in the Second World War. It suggested that it's no more, it's gone for good. However, they never found any remnants of these pieces, so who knows, maybe they'll turn up one day. That would be nice. Nevertheless, Klimt had, when he produced this work, had the previous 7 years' work completely panned, and obviously it added to his reputation as an enfant terrible, a bit of a renegade, and of course created this sensationalism which added to his success in the end. This picture though really put him on the map of art history, and it really put Vienna on the map of art history. In the next video we're going to see how this has influenced the modern era and modern artists. We're looking at Gustav Klimt's The Kiss, and we're going to look at how it's influenced the modern era of artists and the modern era of media. We're so used to seeing it on tea towels and on greetings cards. It's become a bit of a victim of its own success, and it's a bit sort of commercialized entity now. But it has really influenced serious art. A Syrian-born artist, TAMMAM, actually used this artwork and projected it on the side of a bombed building in an unidentified, or it was undisclosed, Syrian town. And of course, the mere idea of the subject title of this piece, The Kiss, the emotions that we can see when looking at this piece, it's really about humanity and human emotion, and we could see how TAMMAM might be trying to convey a message in this war-torn country. This piece has also been used by the Austrian Mint to produce some special edition coins. Interestingly, Klimt's face was put on one side of the coin, and on the other side of the coin a representation or an etching of this work was put, so you could even go and buy your groceries with this piece if you wanted to. Also, Hollywood has used this piece in a couple of notable movies. In 2010, Lena Dunham took the mick out of this piece and of students in one of the quotes from the film, where she said, "Students' rooms are filled with mini fridges and prints of Gustav Klimt's The Kiss." Well, I guess for one, I was probably a stereotype in her eyes, and also, it just shows, the ubiquity of this piece now. In the next video, we're going to look how Klimt has influenced artists with this piece. We're looking at Gustav Klimt's The Kiss today again, and we're looking at which artist he has really influenced with this piece. To be honest with you, was pretty much of a trailblazer, and he was looked up to by so many people in Vienna at the time, but since then he's influenced artists such as Brancusi, who was a sculptor who produced a sculpture of two people kissing in a similar pose to this, and then later on Picasso in 1925 went on to produce a picture of called The Kiss, of a similar composition again, in his style of course, of two people kissing. And actually that was a theme that Picasso used, or he called a number of artworks in his throughout his life, he called The Kiss. But this really is an iconic paving stone in the art history that we see today. I mean, it really paved the way for pattern and ornament in artwork, into this more totalitarian art format. And we can see so many influences, both of the academic style and also of the decorative style in this piece. Follow our page, share with a friend, and comment below.